I remember turning 30 like it was yesterday, though more than 2 decades have passed since then. Back then, I genuinely believed I had all the time in the world. The future stretched out before me like an endless highway, and I figured I could take my time making the big decisions. I could put off the difficult conversations. I could wait for everything to feel just right before committing to anything. There was no urgency. I was still young, still figuring things out, still becoming whoever I was supposed to be. What nobody told me, what I wish someone had pulled me aside and explained, is that 30 is when time starts moving differently. It doesn't feel that way at first. You still wake up with energy. You can still recover from mistakes. You're still in that phase where it feels like you're building towards something. But 30 is actually your last clear shot at changing direction without it costing you everything you've built. After 35, the walls start closing in. You've got a mortgage by then, or kids, or at the very least you've developed patterns of living that have calcified into personality traits. The room to maneuver shrinks. Not all at once, not in some catastrophic way, just steadily, one reasonable compromise at a time. I wish someone older and wiser had sat me down and told me that the next 10 years would determine everything. Not what I accomplished or how much money I made, but who I became in the process. Because at 30, you think you're just choosing between job offers or deciding which relationship is worth investing in or figuring out where you want to live. But that's not what's really happening. You're actually choosing who you'll be at 50. You're setting the trajectory for your entire adult life, and most people drift through that choice like it's no different from picking what to order for lunch. I watched it happen with my closest friends. They took positions at companies they couldn't stand because the salary was too good to walk away from. They told themselves it was temporary, just a year or two to build up savings, maybe 3 at most. They had plans to do something more meaningful later, something that actually mattered to them. But 20 years went by, and they're still sitting in those same offices, still doing work that slowly drains something essential from them. Not because they're trapped, not because they don't have options, but because over time they became the kind of person who accepts the situation. They built up a tolerance for dissatisfaction. They learned to live with the gap between who they wanted to be and who they actually became. That's the part about your 30s that nobody explains clearly enough. You think you're buying yourself time, building security, being responsible and practical. But you're not buying time at all. You're spending it. And what you're spending it on, what you're choosing to tolerate and normalize and accept, that's what becomes your life. One of the strangest things about turning 30 is how quickly relationships start to reveal what they really are. In your 20s, you can lose touch with someone for 6 months and pick up like nothing happened. Everybody's moving, switching jobs, dating, chasing something. There's a lot of forgiveness built into the chaos. At 30, the chaos doesn't disappear, but it changes. It becomes schedules. It becomes responsibilities. It becomes the kind of tired that makes you cancel plans you actually wanted. I remember a friend calling me on a Tuesday night. Nothing urgent. He just wanted to talk. I was sitting on the couch, half watching television, half answering emails I didn't need to answer. I told him I couldn't talk long. 10 minutes, I said. Then I let the conversation die because I thought I'd make it up to him later. A year after that, we ran into each other at a funeral. We hugged, we talked about the weather, And we both did that polite thing people do when they're trying to hide the fact that they don't really know each other anymore. I drove home feeling a kind of shame that didn't have a single dramatic cause. It was just the weight of small neglect. That's what I wish someone had explained. Relationships don't usually break, they thin out. And love, real love, isn't proven by intensity, it's proven by attention. It's texting back when it's not convenient. It's remembering what someone said last week. It's noticing when their voice changes. It's making space for a hard conversation before resentment does the talking for you. At 30, you're old enough to see your own patterns too. You know where you disappear. You know where you get sharp. You know the places you keep quiet because you don't want to be too much. If you don't name those habits, you'll keep repeating them, and you'll call it bad luck. This is where boundaries come in, and I wish we didn't talk about them like they're weapons. A boundary is just the truth said early. It's telling someone what you can and can't do without turning it into a punishment. It's protecting what matters before it gets trampled by assumptions. And if you're choosing a partner, don't only ask how they make you feel on a good day. Watch who they become after a hard day. Watch how they repair. Watch whether they can admit fault without turning it into a trial. Anyone can be charming. Not everyone can be steady. If I could give one simple instruction to my younger self, it would be this. Treat the people you love like they're not permanent. Not with panic, but with care. Make the call. Show up. Apologize quickly. Say the grateful sentence out loud while there's still time for it to land. I didn't start paying attention to my health because I suddenly became disciplined. I started paying attention because I got tired of feeling almost fine. At 30, you can still push through a lot. You can run on short sleep and convince yourself it's normal. You can eat whatever's quick and call it a busy season. You can carry stress like it's part of your identity. And the body for a while will cooperate. That cooperation is what fools you. I remember waking up one morning and realizing I was already tense before anything had happened. My jaw was tight, my shoulders were up. I hadn't even checked my phone yet, and I felt behind. I laughed about it at first like it was proof I was important. Then I realized I was living in a constant state of readiness, like an alarm system nobody turned off. What nobody tells you is that your body keeps score, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet accumulation. Little aches, thinner patience, a mood that drops for no obvious reason, a back that complains after sitting too long, a strange sense that you're always recovering from something. And later, if you ignore those signals, your world gets smaller. You stop doing things because they hurt. You stop going places because you're tired. You start planning your day around what your body will tolerate instead of what your life deserves. So here's what I wish I'd done at 30. I wish I'd treated maintenance as non-negotiable. Not as a fitness project, not as a transformation, just maintenance. Walking most days, lifting something heavy enough to remind my bones what they're for, eating like I respected myself more often than not, drinking water, getting real sleep and not bragging about how little I needed. And I wish I'd taken mental health seriously sooner. Stress isn't just a feeling. It's a chemical state you live in. If you stay there long enough, it changes you. It changes how you talk to people. It changes what you can enjoy. It changes what you believe about the future. There's also the plain, practical part. get checked. Know your blood pressure, know your labs. If your family carries something, treat that information like a map. You don't win points for pretending you're exempt. I'm not saying you need to become perfect. I'm saying you should protect the instrument you're living inside. You only get one body to carry your life, and it's easier to care for it now than to negotiate with it later. At 30, you can still change your trajectory with small decisions that look boring. Boring is good. Boring is what keeps you free. Money is one of the easiest places to lie to yourself because the lie can look responsible. At 30, you start hearing a constant chorus of be smart, build security, think long term. None of that is wrong. The problem is that fear can dress itself up as wisdom. So can status, so can comparison. I remember getting my first real bump in pay and thinking, honestly, that I'd finally relax. I thought the anxious voice would quiet down. It didn't. I just moved the goalpost. I upgraded a few things, told myself I deserved it, and then I needed the next raise to keep the new normal afloat. It happened gradually, so it felt harmless. That's lifestyle creep. And it's less about money than about identity. I didn't notice it until I looked at my bank statement one night and felt that familiar pinch. Even though I was earning more than I ever had, you start buying the version of yourself you want people to see. And if you're not careful, you build a life that requires constant earning to maintain. That's not security. That's a treadmill. What I wish someone had told me is that the best use of money is to reduce panic, not to impress people, not to keep score, to reduce panic. Panic is expensive. It makes you take bad jobs because you're scared. It makes you stay in unhealthy situations because you can't afford to leave. It makes you say yes when you want to say no. Options are what relieve that pressure. So build options. Set a small amount to move automatically into savings before you have a chance to talk yourself out of it. Pay down the debts that make you feel hunted. Save a cushion that turns emergencies into inconveniences. Keep your overhead a little lower than you can manage, not because you're afraid, but because freedom feels good in the body. And be honest about what you're doing when you spend. If it's boredom, admit it. If it's loneliness, admit it. If it's trying to prove you're not behind, admit it. You don't need shame. You need clarity. Spend on things that actually improve your daily life. A decent mattress, a reliable car, a safer place to live, tools that save you time, healthcare you don't postpone. Spend on skills that make you more capable. Those purchases keep paying you back. If you share money with someone, marriage, partnership, talk plainly. Money fights aren't usually about math. They're about trust and secrecy. They're about one person feeling alone in the burden. If you can't talk about money without defensiveness, that's a warning sign, not a quirk. At 30, you don't need to become wealthy overnight. You need to become steady. Steadiness is underrated. It's what lets you breathe when life gets rough, and rough seasons always come. I used to think the people who were winning at life were the ones who moved fast. They answered every message right away. They said yes to everything. They stayed late, showed up early, kept their calendars full, and wore exhaustion like a medal. I did it too for a while because it looked like ambition. Then I hit a strange moment in my 30s. I was busy all the time, but I wasn't proud of anything. I had a lot of activity and very little craft. I could point to emails. I could point to meetings. I couldn't point to much that felt solid. That's when I realized that work will happily take your attention without giving you meaning. It will take your weekends. It will take your nervous system. It will take the best hours of your day, and it will still ask for more, because that's what systems do. The people I admired most weren't the frantic ones. They were the calm ones. They had something they could do well, a skill, a craft, something portable that didn't depend on the mood of one boss. I remember watching a man fix a problem in 10 minutes that would have taken me 2 hours of panic. He wasn't arrogant about it, he was just competent. And the way he moved, steady, unhurried, made me understand what confidence is supposed to look like. So if you're 30, pick something to get good at, not as a hustle, not as a brand, but as a way to be useful. Learn to write clearly, learn to speak plainly, learn to solve problems without drama. Build that kind of competence, and you'll stop begging for approval, because you'll have proof in your hands. And protect your focus. The world will rent your mind by the minute if you let it. Notifications, meetings, updates that feel urgent but don't matter. You can spend a whole day reacting and go to bed feeling hollow. I started making a small boundary with myself. One block of time where I did one thing, start to finish. No multitasking, no checking, just work that could actually be completed. It sounds simple, but it rebuilt my confidence from the inside. Work has seasons too. There are years to push and years to recover. If you treat every season like a sprint, you will break, and breaking costs more than resting ever did. And outside of work, build a life that doesn't require a resume. Read something for pleasure. Learn a hobby that makes you clumsy again. Spend time with people who don't care what you do for a living. The goal isn't to impress anyone. The goal is to build days you can live inside without dread. When I was 30, death was an idea more than a reality. It belonged to news stories, distant relatives, old movies. I could talk about it abstractly, feel a moment of sadness, and then go back to planning my week. Then the first real loss arrived, and the world didn't feel theoretical anymore. I remember standing at a funeral afterward, listening to people trade stories, and realizing how much of a person disappears if nobody bothered to ask while they were alive. I remember leaving a hospital one evening and stepping into the parking lot like it was any other day. Same streetlights, same cars, same ordinary air. But inside me, something had shifted. It was like someone had lowered the volume on all the things I used to worry about. Grief is strange because it doesn't match the calendar. People expect it to be a straight line. Shock, sadness, acceptance, done. It isn't. It comes back in waves. It shows up in a grocery store when you see the brand your father liked. It shows up in a quiet drive when a song takes you somewhere you didn't choose to go. Sometimes it looks like tears. Sometimes it looks like anger. Sometimes it looks like numbness and you feel guilty for being numb. That's normal. Grief has many faces and it changes without warning. What I wish someone had told me earlier is that love is time sensitive. There are sentences you don't get unlimited chances to say. There are apologies that lose their power if they arrive too late. There are people you assume you'll visit someday who won't always be there. So say things now, not as a performance, in plain words. Tell the people in your life what they meant to you. Thank them. Admire them out loud. Apologize cleanly when you've been wrong. And handle practical kindness before crisis forces it. Know where the documents are. Know who has the spare key. Know the basic wishes. Talk about it when everyone can still laugh a little. It feels uncomfortable, but it prevents your family from guessing during the worst week of their lives. Visit the sick. Most people avoid it because they don't know what to say. If you're afraid you'll cry, go anyway. If you're afraid you'll say the wrong thing, say less. Bring something small. Sit. Listen. Let silence be allowed. And when grief returns, on anniversaries, in certain seasons, be gentle with yourself. You're not backsliding, you're remembering. The strongest thing is not handling it alone. The strongest thing is staying human enough to let someone sit with you, to accept a meal, to return a call, to admit you don't know what to do with your hands or your thoughts. Ordinary days are rarer than they look. Treat them like they matter. Fear can sound like good judgment. It tells you to keep the safe job because at least the bills are paid. It tells you to avoid the conversation because conflict is exhausting. It tells you to stay quiet because you don't want to be the problem. It offers comfort and it charges interest. The interest looks like years you can't get back. It looks like a version of you that never quite arrives. It looks like the slow settling into choices you didn't celebrate, but also never refused. I used to think courage would feel dramatic when it showed up, like you'd know you were being brave. Most of the time, it feels ordinary and uncomfortable. It's the email you send while your stomach is tight. It's the honest sentence you say without rehearsing it into something softer than the truth. It's applying for something you might not get. It's ending something that keeps you small, even when no one claps. At 30, you already have evidence you can survive discomfort. You've been embarrassed, you've been disappointed, you've been misunderstood. Use that proof. The fear won't disappear, but it doesn't get to be in charge. This is where values matter. If you don't name what matters to you, other people will hand you their priorities and you'll live inside them without noticing. Write your values down in plain words. Then let those words guide your yes and your no. A clean no is a skill. The first time I practiced it, I sat in my car afterward and felt my heart racing like I'd committed a crime. All I had done was tell the truth about my limits. It doesn't require a long explanation that turns into a debate. It's respectful and final. The first few times you do it, it feels rude. Later, it feels like self-respect. Also, notice what you use to escape yourself. Everyone has a method. Some people drink. Some people work. Some people scroll, gamble, control, pick fights, chase attention. If you don't watch your coping habits, they become your personality. When you feel stuck, don't try to solve your whole life in one night. Do the next honest thing. Honest doesn't mean harsh. It means clean. Pay the bill you've avoided. Schedule the appointment. Take the walk. Tell the truth to the person you love. Clean one corner of the mess. And when you fail, treat it as information, not identity. Adjust. Learn. Try again. Most doors open because someone knocked more than once without turning it into a tragedy. At 30, choose a few brave conversations while repair is still possible. Silence feels easy today. It's expensive later. One day you'll wish you had spoken sooner, while hearts were softer, while time was still generous enough for repair. I spent a long time waiting for clarity like it was going to arrive all at once. I thought meaning would show up as a strong feeling, a single direction, a this is it moment. that would settle everything. For most people, meaning doesn't come that way. It gets built quietly out of ordinary choices. I once asked an older man near the end of his life what he was proud of. He didn't mention his job or his money. He mentioned how he treated his wife when she was difficult, how he stayed kind when he was tired, how he showed up for his grandchildren without needing to be entertained. It was simple, and it was heavy with truth. Joy works like that too. It's often quieter than people expect. It isn't a constant high. It's a clean kitchen after dinner. It's finishing a task you've been avoiding. It's a phone call that ends with laughter. It's the relief of being honest. One of the great thieves of meaning is distraction. If you can't pay attention to your own life, you will miss it. The endless feed, the constant noise, the little hits of novelty, none of it is evil, but it can quietly erase your days. So practice attention like a skill. Put the phone in another room for a while. Sit outside without entertainment. Let your mind wander, then bring it back gently. Notice the season. Notice what you feel in your body. Attention returns with practice, and when it returns, your life becomes more vivid. There is also a kind of loneliness that comes from never being fully present. You can be surrounded and still feel absent. Choose one conversation and actually be there. Look at the face in front of you. Listen long enough to hear what isn't being said, and write things down, not for an audience, but for yourself. What you learned this month, what you're afraid of, what you're grateful for, what you keep postponing. Over time, those pages become a mirror that doesn't flatter, but it tells the truth, and that truth is useful. It shows you what keeps repeating. It shows you what you keep avoiding. It shows you gently what kind of life you are actually living. As you get older, you realize legacy is not fame. It is what your presence does to a room. It is whether people feel steadier after you leave. At 30, choose what you want to be known for in private. Then live in that direction on ordinary days. You don't need to impress the world to live with dignity. You need a life you can sit with at night. That peace is earned, and it is worth more than applause.